There's a photograph from 1905 that will haunt you. It shows a man tied to a post, his body covered in precise cuts, his face twisted in agony, but he's still alive, still conscious. The photograph captured him somewhere between cut 500 and cut Feinson. Imagine being that man. You've been on this post for hours. The pain is moved beyond anything you thought possible. Your body is a map of systematic mutilation, shallow cuts on your chest, deeper ones on your limbs, strategic wounds designed to bleed but not kill. The crowd that gathered at dawn is still here, though some have left for lunch and returned. Children are watching, learning what happens to enemies of the emperor. Street vendors are selling snacks to the spectators. People are chatting, laughing, treating your death like entertainment. The executioner keeps consulting his manual between cuts, following ancient instructions passed down for centuries. This isn't improvisation. This is precision. The manual shows exactly where each cut should be made, how deep, in what order. 3,600 cuts total, designed to keep you alive and conscious for as long as humanly possible. You're not just being killed, you're being transformed into a public lesson about the price of defying imperial authority. And that camera keeps clicking, preserving your suffering for history. Before we explore the brutal reality of lingchi, hit that like button and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from. It's incredible that we're discovering these dark truths together from around the world. Because what you're about to learn about China's most feared punishment will change how you see both justice and cruelty. You didn't commit murder. You didn't rape or pillage. Your crime was political. Maybe you spoke against the emperor. Maybe you were part of a reform movement trying to modernize China. Maybe you were accused of treason by someone who wanted your land. Lingchi wasn't for common criminals. It was reserved for the worst offenses against the state: treason, patricide, killing one's master, plotting against the emperor. Crimes that didn't just break laws but violated the fundamental order of society. The irony is that many men who died by lingchi were reformers, intellectuals, people trying to save China from collapse. In 1898, during the Hundred Days Reform, dozens of progressive thinkers were sentenced to lingchi for attempting to modernize the Qing government. Their crime? Wanting China to survive in a changing world. When your sentence was pronounced, you knew exactly what awaited you. Lingchi was famous throughout China, whispered about in terrified tones. Parents threatened misbehaving children with it. Everyone knew someone who had witnessed an execution, who had seen the posts in Beijing's execution ground, who had heard the screams. You had weeks or months in prison to contemplate your fate. Other prisoners told you stories, some true, some exaggerated, about men who lasted for days, about executioners who were artists of pain, about the manual that detailed every cut. The night before your execution, you couldn't sleep. Your mind kept trying to imagine what it would feel like, but imagination failed. How could you possibly conceive of pain sustained for hours, of watching your own body being carved apart piece by piece? When the guards came for you at dawn, your legs could barely hold you. They had to drag you to the cart that would carry you through Beijing's streets to the execution ground. The cart rolls through Beijing's streets just after sunrise. You're in a cage, your hands bound, your head forced up so everyone can see your face. A placard hangs around your neck, listing your crimes in bold characters. People line the streets to watch you pass. Some throw things, rotten vegetables, stones, worse. Others just stare. You recognize some faces: a man you bought tea from, a woman whose son you tutored. They look away when you make eye contact. The journey takes an hour, winding through neighborhoods where you once lived a normal life, past the market where you shopped, past the temple where you prayed, past your own house where your wife was forced to hang a sign denouncing you to avoid being arrested herself. Beijing's execution ground comes into view. It's an open area outside the city walls, visible from a distance. You can already see the crowd gathering, hundreds of people, maybe thousands. They've been coming since before dawn to get good viewing positions. The posts stand in a row, 8 wooden posts, each about 8 feet tall, with iron rings for binding wrists and ankles. The ground around them is stained dark, blood from previous executions that no amount of rain can wash away. Your cart stops, guards pull you out, and your legs give way. They drag you toward one of the posts. The executioner is waiting, an older man with steady hands and cold eyes. He's done this hundreds of times. You're just another job to him. They strip you to the waist and position you against the post. Your arms are pulled up above your head and bound at the wrists. Your ankles are secured to the base. You can't move, can barely breathe. The wood digs into your back, and then you see the table, the executioner's tools laid out with surgical precision, knives of different sizes, the leather-bound manual open to a page covered in diagrams of the human body. The executioner approaches with his manual. It's an old book, pages yellowed with age, stained with substances you don't want to identify. He studies it carefully, then looks at your body, comparing reality to diagram. This manual is his inheritance, passed down from his father, who received it from his father in a chain going back centuries. It contains the accumulated knowledge of generations of executioners, where to cut, how deep, in what order. The goal is simple but horrifying. Maximize pain while minimizing death. Keep the victim conscious and suffering for as long as possible. Every cut is calculated to achieve this balance. The manual divides the body into sections and prescribes a specific number of cuts for each area. It explains which cuts should be shallow, barely breaking skin, and which should be deeper, reaching muscle. It notes which areas bleed heavily and should be avoided until later. It describes techniques for cutting around major blood vessels to prevent quick death from blood loss. Some versions of the manual specify 3,600 cuts total. Others say the number varies based on the crime. More serious offenses earn more cuts. The executioner has discretion to adjust based on how long the victim remains conscious. You watch him select his first knife. It's small, designed for precise shallow cuts, the kind that will hurt intensely but not damage anything vital. He tests the blade against his thumb, checking sharpness. The crowd has grown quiet, watching this preparation with fascinated attention. Even the children have stopped fidgeting. Everyone knows what's about to happen. The executioner positions himself, knife in hand. He looks at the manual one more time, memorizing the location of the first cut. Then he looks at you, and for just a moment, you see something in his eyes. Not cruelty exactly, more like professional focus. You're not a person to him, you're a technical challenge. He raises the knife. The first cut is shallow, across your chest. It burns like fire, but it's bearable. You clench your teeth, refusing to give the crowd the satisfaction of hearing you scream. The second cut follows immediately. Then the third, each one precisely placed according to the manual. The executioner works with methodical efficiency, like an artist painting a canvas, except his canvas is your flesh, and his paint is your blood. By the 10th cut, you're already screaming. You can't help it. The pain compounds with each new wound. Your body goes into shock, adrenaline flooding your system. But the executioner knows this. He pauses, waiting for your breathing to steady before continuing. Cut 20, cut 30. You've lost count. Time becomes meaningless. There's only pain and the brief seconds between cuts when you can almost breathe. The executioner moves around the post, accessing different parts of your body. He cuts your arms, your shoulders, your sides, each cut placed with precision, avoiding anything that might kill you too quickly. Your blood runs down your body in rivulets, pooling at your feet. At some point, maybe cut 50, maybe cut 70, you notice the photographer, a Westerner with a large camera on a tripod, carefully adjusting his equipment. He's going to immortalize this. Your agony will become a curiosity for people in Paris and London, something exotic and horrifying to discuss over dinner. The thought makes you laugh, though it comes out as a sob. You're dying in precise increments, and someone wants to preserve it for posterity. Around cut 100, the executioner consults his manual again. He's completed the first section, the shallow cuts designed to maximize surface pain. Now he'll move to deeper cuts, targeting muscle tissue. He selects a different knife. This one is larger, designed to penetrate deeper. You watch him approach, and you know the real suffering is just beginning. You can see their faces, thousands of people packed into the execution ground, watching you die by inches. Some are riveted, unable to look away. Others seem bored, checking timepieces, wondering how long this will take. Children sit on their father's shoulders for a better view. This is education, parents bringing their sons and daughters to learn about consequences, about power, about what happens to those who challenge authority. Street vendors move through the crowd selling food, candied hawthorn berries, steamed buns, tea. People are eating while watching you bleed. The disconnect is surreal. Your worst moment is their casual entertainment. You hear conversations. Two men debating whether you'll last until sunset. A woman complaining that the last execution was more dramatic, that prisoners screamed louder, died more spectacularly. You're not suffering enough for her taste. Some people in the crowd knew you, former colleagues, students you taught, neighbors from your old life. They're required to attend. Failing to witness the execution of a condemned traitor could cast suspicion on them. So they watch, faces carefully neutral, afraid to show sympathy. Your wife isn't here. They didn't require that mercy, at least. But you know she's been forced to denounce you publicly, to declare that you deserve this fate, to separate herself from your crimes, to protect what remains of your family. Between cuts, you search the crowd for one sympathetic face, someone who might remember you as more than a traitor, who might mourn what's happening, but you find only curiosity, satisfaction, or carefully maintained indifference. The executioner makes another cut. You've lost count now. Everything is pain, and someone in the crowd cheers. Others join in, applauding the executioner's skill, like spectators at a theatrical performance. You're not human to them anymore. You're a morality play made flesh, a living demonstration of imperial justice. Hours have passed. You've drifted in and out of consciousness, your body trying to escape what your mind can't. The executioner has paused several times, waiting for you to revive before continuing. Dead men can't suffer, and suffering is the point. An assistant approaches the executioner, holding a small pipe. They speak in low tones. You catch fragments, losing him not even halfway. Give him some. The executioner considers, then nods. The assistant brings the opium pipe to your lips. You want to refuse. Opium will extend this torture, keep you conscious for more cuts, but your body betrays you. You inhale. The drug doesn't eliminate pain, it shifts it, makes it feel distant and dreamlike, without making it any less real. You're more aware now, which is worse. You can feel every cut with clarity, can count them again, can understand with horrible precision what's being done to your body. This is calculated mercy. Just enough opium to prevent death from shock, not enough to dull the pain significantly. The executioner needs you conscious, but not so conscious that your heart gives out from the trauma. Later, Western observers will claim the opium was humanitarian, evidence that even brutal Chinese executioners showed some compassion. They'll be wrong. The opium is economics, not kindness. A prisoner who dies too quickly wastes the execution's deterrent value. With the opium working through your system, the executioner resumes his work. Deeper cuts now, targeting muscle groups. Your screams take on a different quality, more raw, more desperate. The crowd leans forward, interested again after the lull. You realize with horror that you might last until sunset after all. The sun is lower now. You've been on this post for 6 hours, maybe 7. Your body is no longer recognizable as human, just meat carved into patterns of suffering. The executioner has long since stopped consulting his manual. He knows the remaining cuts by heart. These are the final ones, the cuts to vital areas that have been saved for last, the cuts that will actually kill you. Part of you begs for it. Part of you wants him to hurry, to make that final cut that will release you. But another part, some stubborn core of will, still fights, still wants to live, even now, even like this. Your vision is fading. Blood loss, shock, and pain have pushed you to the edge of consciousness. The faces in the crowd blur together. The executioner's movements become slow and dreamlike. You think about your children, your wife, the life you had before ambition and idealism brought you to this post. You think about the reforms you wanted, the China you dreamed of helping build. Was it worth this? The executioner positions his knife over your throat. This is it, the final cut. After all these hours, after all this suffering, it will end with a single stroke. You want to say something, some final words that will give meaning to this death, but your throat is too damaged, your voice long gone. All you can do is close your eyes. The knife moves, you feel the blade enter flesh, feel your blood, what remains of it, flowing freely at last. For a moment, there's a strange clarity. The pain recedes, replaced by numbness. You can hear the crowd murmuring, can feel the late afternoon sun on what remains of your skin. Then nothing. Your body stays tied to the post for hours after death. The crowd gradually disperses, disappointed that the show is over. The executioner and his assistants clean their tools with professional efficiency, packing away knives and the precious manual. Eventually, they cut you down. Your corpse falls into the dirt, and workers load it onto a cart with the other bodies from today's executions. 8 men total, all killed for crimes against the state, all serving as warnings to anyone who might consider rebellion. They don't let your family claim the body. That's part of the punishment. No proper burial, no ancestral rites. Your corpse will be thrown into a mass grave outside the city, mixed with criminals and suicides, denied the ceremonies that might grant your spirit peace. Your wife waits at home, knowing you're dead, but unable to mourn publicly. To show grief would suggest sympathy with your crimes, would endanger what remains of the family. She burns incense in secret, whispering prayers she can't speak aloud. Your children will grow up being told their father was a traitor who deserved his fate. They'll change their surnames to escape the stigma. In a generation, no one will remember you were once a scholar who wanted to save China. But those photographs survive. The Western photographer who documented your execution develops his plates, makes prints, begins circulating them. They appear in newspapers across Europe and America, usually with captions describing Chinese barbarism, justifying colonial intervention. Your death becomes propaganda. The suffering you endured becomes evidence that China needs to be civilized by Western powers. The very reforms you died supporting will eventually come, but forced from outside, accompanied by humiliation and foreign control. This is the final cruelty of lingchi. Even your death isn't really yours. It's been appropriated, transformed into a tool for purposes you never intended. In 1905, the Qing dynasty officially abolished lingchi. Western pressure, internal reform movements, and the simple reality that China needed to modernize all contributed to ending the practice. Your execution was among the last. The abolition wasn't humanitarian progress exactly, it was political necessity. China was being carved up by foreign powers, humiliated militarily and economically. To be taken seriously on the world stage, the Qing needed to abandon punishments the West considered barbaric. The executioners who practiced Ling Chi found themselves obsolete overnight. Their carefully preserved manuals, their inherited techniques, their professional expertise, all suddenly worthless. Some found other work, others simply disappeared into history. The execution grounds fell silent, the posts were torn down. Within a few years, new buildings covered the blood-stained earth, where thousands had died by systematic mutilation. But the photographs remained. They circulated in the West for decades, used as evidence of Oriental cruelty, of the need for civilizing missions. Few bothered to mention that many Lingchi victims were reformers trying to modernize China, killed by a conservative dynasty, terrified of change. Even fewer acknowledged Western hypocrisy, that while Europeans expressed horror at Lingchi, they were simultaneously conducting their own brutalities in colonies across Asia and Africa. The execution methods were different, but the suffering was equally real. Today, if you search for information about Lingchi, you'll find those photographs from 1905. The images are disturbing enough that many websites blur them, but they exist preserved forever, showing men in the final stages of systematic torture. Modern China doesn't talk much about Lingchi. It's an embarrassment, a reminder of the backward past that communist and nationalist governments alike wanted to erase. The official narrative emphasizes modernization, progress, leaving behind superstition and cruelty. But the practice happened. Thousands of men died this way over centuries. Their suffering was real, systematic, and legally sanctioned. Understanding Lingchi isn't about judging ancient China. Every culture has brutal practices in its past. It's about understanding how legal systems can institutionalize cruelty, how public spectacle can normalize suffering, and how even the most horrific practices can seem reasonable to people within a particular cultural moment. If learning about Lingchi disturbed you, good, share this video and subscribe for more history that refuses to sanitize the past. Comment where you're watching from and what shocked you most. The next time someone talks about the good old days, remember the execution post. Remember the manual with its careful diagrams. Remember the crowd eating snacks while watching a man die by inches. History isn't always noble or inspiring. Sometimes it's just brutal, and remembering that brutality, understanding how it functioned and why it persisted, helps us recognize similar patterns in our own time. The posts are gone, the manuals are museum pieces, the executioners are long dead, but the photographs remain, forcing us to witness suffering we'd prefer to forget. That discomfort, that horror you feel looking at those images, that's what makes you different from the crowd that gathered to watch. That's what makes you human. Don't look away,